Вітаю, колеги.
Welcome, dear colleagues. Welcome, Oksana. So we are at the second stage of the selection process for the members of the HQCJ. We're at the interview stage, and we have an interview with Oksana Andriichuk. The selection commission is present in its full composition, and before we start the interview itself, let me tell about a couple of procedural things and the protocol. The interview itself will last from 60 to 90 minutes approximately. All the members of the commission will be asking questions, taking turns, and the round of questions will be launched by Stephen Markman, my colleague, who is the rapporteur for your candidacy. We would ask you while giving answers, and we will also try to do the same. Do not inform any personal information about yourself or about any third parties like names, surnames, addresses, contact phone numbers. And if you want to have a part of the interview closed, suppose you want to share some sensitive information related to you or any third parties, your relatives or close friends of yours, you may make a request for us to do this, and we will consider your request. And if we start discussing those sensitive issues, we will not have that part of the interview broadcast. We will continue the interview, but this part will be closed for the public. At the beginning of the interview, you will have a chance to have an introductory speech where you will tell us about yourself and about your motivation for participation in the selection process. And also, at the end of the interview, you will have a chance to sum it all up and to probably draw our attention to the most important things that you want us to be heard and that you consider to be important. Suppose there is an air alert, we will stop the interview for the time being and we will wait until the air alert is over in the bomb shelter, and after that we will resume our interview. Yesterday we also had some electricity problems. Well, today, thanks God, it seems that we don't have any problems like this, but in case there is a problem with electricity, we will have an interruption and then we will continue. From the point of view of the protocol, that's all. Do you have any questions? Do you have any requests as for now regarding having a part of the interview closed? Thank you. Well, to tell the truth, I don't think that there are any points in my life that would need closed consideration, but just let me draw the attention to the commission to this point. If there are some questions related to the father of my child, taken into account where he is as for now, maybe that part should be closed. Thank you. It's clear, colleagues. So, suppose you have any questions regarding this, we will have that part of the interview closed following the request made by Oksana. Well, that's all for me. Thank you. And let me give the floor to my colleague, Stephen Markman. Stephen, you're very much welcome.
Good morning, Judge Andriichuk. Thank you very much for your presence here and your participation in this competition. We very much appreciate it. Let me please introduce you briefly, and then we will ask you, as our chief has indicated, to share whatever you'd like to with us to introduce yourself. There's no rules for how to do it. There's nothing you must say or nothing you can't say. So whatever you would like to communicate to us and have us know at the outset of the conversation would be appropriate at that time. Judge Oksana Andriichuk has served for 12 years as a judge of the Commercial Court of the Rivne region, the city of Rivne. Prior to this, she attended Taras Shevchenko National University in Kyiv, where she received 3 degrees, her bachelor's degree a master's degree in the law in 2004, and a PhD in the law 5 years later when she wrote her thesis, her doctorate thesis on the subject of civil procedures in Ukraine. While studying for her PhD, she also taught for 2 years at the Taras Shevchenko Law School, and afterwards she worked for more than 4 years in the practice of law in the private sector. And for 5 years of her service on the court, which, as I say, now amounts to 12 years of total service, she has been its speaker judge. She has also, at earlier times in her career, served as a specialist for the State Agency on Bankruptcy in Rivne, a lecturer at the Interpersonnel Academy of Management in Rivne, and was selected as a delegate of the 13th Congress of Judges of Ukraine. Judge Andriichuk, of course, lives in the Rivne region and has a minor daughter. She has previously participated in a competition for judge of the High Court for Intellectual Property. She scored very highly in her participation in that competition. And all in all, Judge Andriichuk has approximately 26 years in the field of the practice of law. And once again, it's an honor to have you here this morning, Judge Andriichuk. Would you care to share any thoughts with us as to what we should know about you?
Thank you. So before I go over to my introductory speech, I would like to express my gratitude to the members of the commission or to those who were arranging the schedule, because there was a request uh, to have this interview at the second, closer to the second part of the day, because I have a minor child, and that's why I needed some time to reach the place of the interview. So thank you for taking this into consideration. As far as my presentation is concerned, well, you have actually presented half of the information that I wanted to share with you. I'll have to repeat some things, but let me start with my motivation, which urged me to participate in this selection process. As you know, well, probably most Ukrainians since the moment of the Russian full-scale invasion into Ukraine have changed their priorities, and I'm no exception here. And I keep thinking that probably having some skills and some experience, I could give more than I am giving as for now to the state, as compared to the people who are sacrificing their lives and health on a daily basis for the well-being of our country. And I think that this was my major motivation behind my decision to apply for this selection, because we have fight not just at the front line but inside the country, and we all have to take effort for our country to be a prospering country after our victory, because otherwise it may happen that we wake up one day in a semi-destroyed country with the minimum population. We have to take our effort to make Ukraine happen as the state. I'm not pursuing any ambitious goals. This is not related to my self fulfillment or my own ambition to get a certain position and to be influential. I do it just because of my willingness to be useful. Well, regarding in what I could contribute, you already mentioned some of the facts. While introducing me, I will just repeat them. In particular, I think that I need to provide those facts for you to see my relevance for the commission. And for this, I need to voice some hard facts which speak for themselves, which show what kind of personality I am and what skills I have. The rapporteur has already mentioned that I graduated from one of the best higher educational institutions of Ukraine, which is Taras Shevchenko National University of Kyiv. I got 2 diplomas, bachelor's and master's diplomas with honors, and also at the age of 28, I presented my thesis and got the PhD in law. Well, I combine my studies with my job, and being the fifth year student of the university, I started earning my own living. Also, there is another fact that speaks for itself. This is the fact of my participation in selection procedures, in particular for the high specialist courts and intellectual property and the appeal uh, chamber of this court. Um, I got the maximum points. It was 88 out of 90, and within the competition for the appellate court, um, the because you know that the previous competition has not been completed. That's why we have another competition for the appellate courts for vacancies there, and I participated in it. I got 149 points out of 150 while performing the test tasks. I think that this information proves that my level of knowledge is high and my diligence and laboriousness good. I really can work in emergency conditions because I participate in those competitions, but at the same time, I do my job and I'm bringing up a minor child. As far as my professional skills are concerned, I think that um, I'm performing my judicial duties in the most transparent and effective way, and this may be proven by the statistics of the decisions that I passed and that were not reversed, and by the timelines of considerations of cases. And there are no claims against me with the High Council of Justice over 12 years of my judicial career. There have been no claims, which also speaks well of me. And there are some things that cannot be checked, but I think that they are important. And that's why I would like to draw your attention to these facts. I consider myself to be free from any pressure, any threats, and I'm always honest and frank with the people. I don't lie. Uh, so, of course, these are just my words. I cannot give you any life stories that would prove it. All, and that's it. Thank you.
Very much, Judge. Uh, Can you tell me what is the status of the competition for the High Court for Intellectual Property, please?
Well, as you can see in the website of the HQCJ, it's still going on. If I'm not mistaken, in 2018, the process started, and the candidates passed the stage of testing of the knowledge of law. We also wrote the practical cases solutions. We passed cognitive tests and psychological tests, and the results are already there. They are in the materials of the judicial dossier, and the same holds true for the appeal chamber. But unfortunately, there were some events um, because of which the HQCJ stopped its functioning. I mean, the former composition, and it all stopped. Now the HQCJ has started functioning again with its new composition, and to tell the truth, the fate of this selection process in this court is not known to me. I don't know whether the contest is to be renewed or there will be a new selection. I don't know.
First question to you is quite an obvious question under these circumstances. What if tomorrow you learned that you had been selected for both of these competitions? What would you do?
You mean this one and that one for the Hind court, or do you mean the one for the? Because I also participated in the one for the appeal chamber. So you mean the HQCJ selection and the selection for the High Specialist Court on Intellectual Property? Well, when I was submitting my documents for participation in the selection for the HQCJ, I realized that I'm still a participant of the previous selections, though I do not lay great hopes at least for now, for this competition to the High Court and intellectual property. I actually expected that I would rather be selected within the selection process for the appeal chamber. But I can tell you only one thing. If you submit your documents somewhere, that means that you must be ready for possible outcomes. So, if we speak in purely hypothetical terms, and if we assume that the selection for the HQCJ is completed before the one for appellate courts, well, there will be no problem at all for me then. And of course, if there is a conflict of interest between my being the HQCJ and the candidate for that for the appellate court, I will just terminate my participation in that selection.
Answer. We appreciate it. Now, you've undergone two competitions then. You've undergone the competition for the High Court for Intellectual Property, and you're now undergoing this competition for the HQCJ. And if you are successful in the present competition, you yourself will be participating in many future decisions having to do with judicial selection. Is that not true?
Yes, obviously. As a member of the HQCJ, I will have to do this.
And what have you learned from these competitions, both of the competitions? I don't necessarily want you to compare the competitions, but what lessons have you, Judge Andriichuk, learned about how to select judges, or perhaps in some respects, how not to select judges? What have you learned from these competitions?
Well, as a participant of the selection for the high specialized court on intellectual property, I can tell that I felt sad about having passed so many stages, but still be left with nothing after all possible tests had been passed and after I had written the court decision. The only lesson I've learned is probably that if the state represented by specific bodies, well, of course, there are things we cannot affect, but the state undertaking some commitments should follow those commitments and comply with them. And I know that during the previous interviews, it was mentioned that the position of a judge is not the one for which we have many volunteers, many people willing to get it. And this is true. And I think that one of the reasons for that is that the state quite often changes the rules of the game during the very game. And this has a negative outcome. I think that it negatively affects the number of participants in the selection processes.
One of the ways that we have tried to understand the competitors in this competition have been through a fairly elaborate selection of motivation questions. And of course, you've been asked those same questions and you've given answers to those questions. And many of your answers are very thoughtful. One I'd like to call attention to, though, is where you say, it is my belief that my knowledge and personal qualities will help to form a virtuous and professional judiciary. Well, we certainly want a virtuous and professional judiciary, and you well understand what type of judiciary we need to attain in Ukraine. But how specifically will you accomplish this? That's a very broad answer, and to me at least, it doesn't provide a lot of direction or guidance in terms of what your thoughts are, what you, Judge Andriichuk, will do if you're placed on the High Qualification Commission. What are you going to bring to the commission? What difference will you make on the commission? How does your knowledge and personal qualities allow you to participate thoughtfully and insightfully on that commission?
Thank you for the question. Well, as far as my qualities are concerned, I've tried to already characterize them using some hard facts from my CV. Well, regarding the question how we select professional and competent judges who are people of integrity, well, you know, I was thinking for quite a long period of time how we could really launch an effective court system, but I would actually like to protect and advocate the system that we currently have got, because I think that this is just the global problem of the Ukrainian society in general. Quite often, judges are blamed and accused of doing something in the wrong way, or they are accused of some corruption actions, but if we go in retrospect, we will see a lot of other problems and challenges in our society, our state, and not just the judiciary. What I mean is that we may recall the Vradivka police department. Probably you don't know about those cases, but these are millionaires from territorial recruitment centers of the military medical commissions, the people who have earned millions working there, but they are part of our society, and we need to clearly understand that there are good judges and there are bad judges. There are good members of the society and there are bad members of society. I just do believe that the part of the society which is larger is better. That's why we managed to still fight, still survive, and still be an independent state. And as far as your question is concerned about my role in the commission, I would try to do my best to admit to the competition those judges who are really people of integrity and who are professional and competent judges. And I think that now, in wartime, there is another aspect that comes to the forefront. This is the patriotic aspect. I don't know what you think of that, but I think that if a person is not willing to stay in this country, a person just wants to earn some money and then would like to go to the West. I don't think that this person will ever work effectively as a judge.
With you, but I'm still having a little difficulty. Of course, we want to distinguish between those people who will be good judges and those people who will not be good judges, just like we're trying to do on this commission. We want good people, and we think you may be one of those one of the right people. But I'm still trying to understand what people will say of Judge Andriichuk when she leaves the commission. This is how she made a difference. This is what she brought to the commission from her experience that we would never have had if she had not been on this commission. I know these are difficult things, but we're all trying to struggle with putting the very best people we can on this commission because, as you know, it's so important what we do for the transformation of the judiciary of your country, is it not?
Well, as far as my legacy and my contribution as a member of the HQCJ is concerned, I think I can tell about this only with time. I think that hypothetically, I will be recalled as a professional member of the HQCJ who was never taking bribes, but I probably cannot give you the answer regarding what my specific contribution could be. So far I have nothing to do with the work of that commission, and I still need to get acquainted with the challenges that I will be faced with, and then I will be able to tell what my response to those challenges will be.
Turn to the motivation one more time. You also say in the motivation, and I think this is an intelligent observation, no one knows their own strength until it is tested. You say that about yourself. My question is, has yours been tested? And if it hasn't been, how do we know whether or not you will bring strength to this commission in the way that it needs to be comprised of people with strength of convictions and determination and the objectives that need to be achieved? Has your strength been tested? And if it hasn't, how are we to guess what that strength will be when someday it is tested in a decision that you have to make, in which you stand in opposition to the rest of the commission, for example?
Well, I'll probably start from the end, whether it's possible for me to contest the decisions made by other members of the commission. Well, it all depends on the decision itself, how far I agree with that decision or not, how motivated and well reasoned those decisions are, and whether I'm able to reason my own decision and my opinion. I think that this directly affects whether it's possible for one member of the commission to convince the other member of the commission of the rightness of his opinion. And I started from the end, and I still would like to go backwards. But it was a long question. I have unfortunately forgotten this question. If you could repeat the first part of your question, just remind me in several words.
I think the question is basically, how are we going to know how you are going to react in difficult circumstances, since you say it's so important that we don't really know how we're going to react unless we've been tested. And I'm not sure you've said you've been tested in the way that you might be tested on the commission. Well, there'll be other questions, but let me turn it over to my.
No, thank you. I've got the question. Let me try to give you the answer. In my motivation letter, um, I also answered another question regarding why you should believe in me more than in other members of the in other candidates, and I my answer was that actually there is no way for that. You can just ground your opinion on some objective hard facts from my CV, from which you can draw real conclusions, and all the other things are just my words, the words of a person whom you actually don't know as such. You don't know me personally. And I understand that this decision is really difficult to make. And this is exactly the process for the HQCJ members. They also have to pass complicated decisions when they select judges.
Okay, I appreciate your thoughts. Thank you. I'm going to pass you on now to my colleague, Judge Zarzeczny, and thank you again.
Thank you. Mike, microphone.
Thank you for accepting our invitation to join us this afternoon in this competition. I have an interest and concern in two particular aspects of your career and your competencies. The one is the very accomplished academic career that you have had. You certainly are no stranger to education and no stranger to what it takes to accomplish a very good and respectful result. The reason I want to deal with that aspect of your application and your competencies is because, as you may be aware, there is a very close and important relationship that the High Qualification Commission has with the National School of Judges. It is no surprise, of course, that the High Qualification Commission is responsible for the education of individuals who then are candidates for judicial appointment. Some questions have been raised about the nature of the work of the National School of Judges, and what changes, if any, might be made to the education of judge candidates by the National School. Um, I would be interested in hearing your opinion about these questions, what your opinion is of the current education of judge candidates, and secondly, what changes, if any, that you might make as a member or encourage be made by the HQCJ as a member.
Thank you for the question. Well, the I've never been the lecturer at the National School of Judges. I'm not that much familiar with the work of the National School of Judges, though I have had some trainings because there is a legislative requirement for judges who work more than 5 years as a judge have to undergo this regular training once in 3 years. Um, and my last time when I had to deal with the National School of Judges of Ukraine was during the selection for appeal courts. And the questions for the uh, c- test were prepared by the National School of Judges. I can tell you from my own experience that I was not that much satisfied with the questions, their formulation, the wording, the grammar aspects. I think that the questions themselves, half of them, were not related to the work of judges of commercial courts. They had nothing to do with the work of that judge. So I think that that may be one of the changes. This corpus of test items could be improved. As far as some positive things are concerned, and I can tell it only from my own experience because I don't know what the work in the National School of Judges looks like from the inside. I'm just the service user, and that's the position from which I can assess the work of the National School of Judges. So, as for me, what I liked the most, and I think that this experience should be expanded and replicated. So what I liked the most was some lectures or workshops delivered by judges, incumbent judges from the Supreme Court or from the High Commercial Court. It was always informative. It was always useful from the point of view of law enforcement and application of law, and that is something that was related directly to our activity, because quite often they offer some workshops or some lectures of a very theoretical nature that were distant from our practice, and um, the outcomes were not illustrative because those workshops did not bring any use to judges. So that's what I can tell from my experience.
All right, thank you. As I say, your academic experience should bring considerable benefit to the HQCJ in the educational field of judges. The other aspect of your career that I'm interested in is your role as judge rapporteur, speaker judge of your court. Now, can you tell us just a little bit in your court what duties and responsibilities you had as a rapporteur?
Well, thank you for the question. I'm the judge speaker, the judge rapporteur for my court, and well, I would be supposed to comment upon the high-profile cases where the society shows interest. But due to the location of our court, this is in Rivne region, so we don't have any large companies or any high profile cases that would really evoke public interest. That's why, though I was elected for this position and I had some trainings to know how I am supposed to fulfill my duties, but it was not a single time that I ever commented any high profile cases in public. But the basic functions would be to comment upon high profile cases and to convey the messages to the public, to do it in a competent way without interfering into the administration of justice and without commenting the case in its essence, but to meet the interest of the public.
I take this subject up with you is that you say in your motivation documents that, among other things, you have a concern to increase public confidence in the judiciary in Ukraine. I'm going to take that a step farther. I think that there is also a concern to increase public trust and confidence in the HQCJ and the work of the HQCJ. The HQCJ, as is the case with our commission, works for the benefit of the people and the citizens of Ukraine. And if the citizens of Ukraine and the other interested parties who have a stake in the work of the HQCJ don't know the HQCJ, are not familiar with its work, there is no communication between the HQCJ and members of the public, then it is very difficult to generate that trust and confidence that you're speaking of. Our commission recognized that very early on in its process. We invited the media to a number of announcement events. There were television, radio, print media present. Myself and now our chairman were interviewed by media. My colleagues, Judge Mizentsev and Mr. Brookhuizen, met with the Women Judges Association to encourage women judges to apply for a position on the High Qualification Commission. My colleagues met with NABU to elicit their support. We met as an entire commission 4 or 5 times with civil society representatives, a room full of 10 or 15, perhaps even as many as 20 representatives. That is what I call outreach. And you have been a judge speaker of your court. You are familiar, as I understand now, with some importance that that role has. What would you recommend, or what do you think would be a good idea to have the High Qualification Commission reach out to the public media, inform them of their work, and increase the public's trust and confidence in that institution? Do you have any ideas?
Well, in fact, you have yourself voiced those ideas. This means being more in public, staying more in public. That's what the courts of Ukraine lack, not just the HQCJ. Because if we watch the news, normally we have the coverage of high-profile cases, and normally this is negative coverage. And the same refers to the activity of the HQCJ. I know that there is a program, maybe not one, but I know about one program, Espresso TV program, and there, well, I don't remember what is the name of the program, but they highlight the work of different institutions, including the HQCJ. And whenever I watch this program, I can see that there are some parts of interviews with the candidates regarding which there are some doubts and concerns as to their integrity. And the headlines may be like this: the HQCJ of Ukraine has given one more chance to a judge who lacks integrity. So, of course, the HQCJ should also arrange that outreach campaign and to explain the decisions, because these are not court decisions that you cannot comment upon during the case consideration. They need to have public outreach to comment upon those decisions, to reach the TV and radio channels, providing those news. And you should convey those messages and explain why this decision has been taking place, reason the decision in that way. So, because otherwise we have just one side, and then there is no chance in the society reaching this positive opinion about the HQCJ.
In favor and advocate for the appointment of a HQCJ speaker and rapporteur, and would you be prepared to volunteer to do that role?
Well, to tell the truth is difficult for me to say because I am not quite well aware of the structure of the HQCJ. Maybe they have a public outreach department, and it is this department that is not fully functioning. Maybe we should focus on the activity of that department and make it work, but I'm not sure whether it exists. But of course, if that is not the case, we need to probably create this department, or by analogy to courts, the commission may really have judge speaker, not judge speaker, but the commissioner speaker. Um, what matters is the final result reaches the society, and the society finds out why some decisions have been taken. The decisions that are considered by public activists to be negative. And if public activists consider that the decision of the HQCJ counteracts their stance, then these decisions need to be commented, and the society will get two sides of the story, and then they may pass their own conclusion. Well, I'm sorry, colleagues, as the moderator, let me remind you of the time.
I'll pass, thank you for your answers. I'll pass the chair then to Judge Verlanov.
Thank you. Thank you, Ted. Oksana, you have already informed us that you simultaneously participate in several selection processes for the appeals chamber of the High Specialized Court on Intellectual Property, the High Court on Intellectual Property, and the selection for the judges of appellate courts. Please explain which of the selection processes is a priority for you and why. Well, as far as selection processes are concerned, for the High Court on Intellectual Property, well, I'm not considering this selection at all because it was actually terminated. Yes, but it's terminated, but not finally terminated. It may be resumed. Yes, but anyway, um, it's such a long-lasting process that I'm not taking it into account, and I'm not sure that there will be any logical continuation and completion, because I think that the people who participated in the selection will probably not be eager to keep on with their participation. Yeah, but what is your attitude to that? To tell the truth, as for now, taking into account the fact that 6 years have elapsed, well, I'm rather skeptical about this selection and to having it completed. As far as the ongoing selection is concerned, I mean, the one in which I participate, because, well, there at the previous competition, I'm just at the what it left is just the stage of the interview. Yes, as from your words, we have understood that you have already passed the test. Yes, the test for knowledge in the field of law, and you got 149 points out of 150. So please proceed. Yeah, let me just explain why it so happened, because you may think that I participate in all possible selection processes, whichever are announced, but would be the wrong idea. Let me explain why I generally participate in competitions. No, please just focus on the competition, on the selection, which would be a priority for you. Let me still tell that the competition for appellate courts and the competition for the HQCJ were considered by I considered them to be parallel processes, because the competition for the appellate courts was announced at the end of the previous year, and actually I thought that it would have been completed by the beginning of this election. So that is actually the reason of yours. The reason you thought that if you pass there, then you will not participate in the next election. No, it's not the reason, but I just mean that I thought that these would be parallel selection processes. Well, I think that you are more interested in the selection for the HQCJ, so let me tell you that applying here, I already had a strong suspicion that the selection for the appellate courts would not have been completed by that time. But I applied because I consider myself to be a mature adult, and positive completion of one competition definitely automatically excludes my participation in a different competition. All the more if there is a conflict of interest there. Okay, thank you. Clear. And could you please tell me, you have already gone through some selection procedures, you're well acquainted with them, and what needs to be changed, do you think? What can be improved in the assessment of judges? What would you change?
Do you mean the selection? No. So I'm a candidate and I'm speaking from my own experience, right? Yes, thank you for this question because there's a lot that I can say here because I do have many questions. Not so much with regards to the interviews because they are foreseen and we understand how they are regulated and why we have the interviews and what kind of information is included into the judicial dossiers. But I do have remarks about the tests. I've already mentioned some of those. So we need to improve the tests. Yes, in my opinion, that's a thing that could be improved. What else? I'm not really sure. I've heard about the cognitive tests. I would like to maybe go through this process. I don't know about the psychological test because when I participated in this selection for the position of a judge to the High Intellectual Property Court and the appellate chamber of this court, or maybe it was the qualification assessment during which we had the psychological test. And then I know how the candidates prepared for those tests. So they were preparing for psychological tests. And when I took the test for the first time, I was completely honest. And I really know that many candidates actually prepared for the test, and the results of the test do not really match the psychological portrait of candidates. So I don't think this is something that should be factored in during the interviews, and we shouldn't be taking into consideration the results of these tests because you can look at the judicial dossiers. I just did an experiment. During the first round, I gave honest answers the way I felt and believed at the time, and then during the second time I was taking the test, I was choosing the answers which, in my opinion, were deemed correct, not those that actually corresponded to my ideas, but the answers that I thought were correct. And if you compare the two tests from my judicial dossiers, you would see that the results were completely different. So what I'm trying to say here is that the results of these tests should not be something that we should factor in the decision-making process. And coming back to the psychological tests again, I may be completely wrong here. I'm just voicing my personal opinion. After the end of the tests, we had an interview with a psychologist. And those psychologists, they were just young kids. They looked like recent college graduates. And they came to us and they had an interview with us. So I'm a little bit on the younger side. So what is your suggestion then? I don't think it's adequate when a person who is in their early 20s is having an interview trying to assess someone's psychological state. And we are talking about interviewing somebody who is already in their 60s and who is about to retire. I'm not sure that such a young psychologist will be able to provide a comprehensive assessment based on a 10-minute conversation. Thank you, Oksana. That's all from my side. With this, I'm giving the floor to Robert. Robert, you're welcome.
Yes. Of course, I have read your motivation letter, Oksana, and in the information in your motivation letter, you say, and I will quote in English, negative information related to accusations against judges, corruption, which are often presented as proven facts, which is the wrong approach. However, it should be acknowledged that the problem exists among the representatives of judicial institutions. There's almost no coverage of positive experiences, except for high-profile cases if public's expectations coincide with the decisions made. And these positive experiences include thousands of decisions. Well, if I read this, then what I read is that you say, well, the press is publishing all kind of negative information about alleged corruption among the judiciary. I know it exists, but it is rare. And this gives a negative view of the judiciary. Is that your view, or did I not? It's always different from what I say to you.
I don't really understand the question. Well, my opinion has not changed from what I stated here. So, are you asking me whether I believe that there is a low level of corruption in the judiciary?
And what it says here is that you say there may be a bit of corruption, but the corruption is relatively low. And it is such an issue because the press is reporting on it, and they should be reporting positively about other cases. That's what I read.
What I actually meant is maybe I have already partly answered this question. We do have this problem in the judiciary. I was just saying that it's not the problem of the judiciary alone. It's part of the problem pertaining to the society as such. I was just trying to say that not all judges are corrupt, that not all judges lack integrity. But of course, I understand that these bad judges contribute to the overall bad reputation of the judiciary. But I'm part of the system and I understand that the current state of affairs and the attitudes toward judges are formulated because of mass media. I think that mass media has contributed to the general negative perception of the profession. And when people ask me what I do, I just tell them I'm a lawyer. Because if I answered that I worked as a judge, that would already contribute to their stereotypical perception of who I was as a person.
Your view then that the press should not report on corruption in the judiciary?
No, this is not what I meant. I was just trying to say that I cannot speak on the number of decisions made. Maybe I can only judge based on the decisions made in criminal proceedings. And so I'm talking about, let's say, those judges that took a bribe for making unlawful decisions. But I think that the statistics, unfortunately, is not getting better. Uh, I'm saying that I'm, as a judge of a trial court, would like to say that, in fact, judges do a lot of work. And maybe the commercial courts make not that many decisions, but in trial courts, the workload is really high. The same applies to administrative courts. And it doesn't mean that every decision made has been made with a bribe. So you can look in the registry, and there are thousands of decisions there, and it's all the result of the work of judges. And nobody mentions that. Unfortunately, only negative cases linked to corruption I mentioned. So I think it should be a more balanced view, a more balanced coverage, not just the negatives, but also the positives in the work of courts. Again, I do not watch all TV shows, but I remember that once it was a very positive comment about the work of a judge. I don't remember who the judge was. It was some district court, a trial court in the city of Odessa. I don't really remember the name of the judge. It was a criminal proceeding, and a decision was made with regards to children, and by analogy with the practice that is common in the US, the punishment was quite lenient because the circumstances of the case were considered. They understood why the children committed the crime, and they were made to read a specific list of books. And that was a story that was highlighted in media, but this is a rare case when we have such positive situations covered by media. So the media coverage should be more balanced.
Maybe you have read in the news that the president of the Supreme Court has been arrested when he had in hand quite a lot of money, I believe in 12 piles. And wouldn't you feel that this fact that the guy who's the boss of the highest court was arrested on these kind of allegations would have, of course, a negative effect on any judge that works in Ukraine? And that doesn't help to have positive news about other judges, because if the top judge has an issue, any judge has an issue. Or is that, do you not agree with me?
Yes, I agree with you.
And then with the Supreme Court, when there is a president of the court found to be possibly corrupt, because there's not a judgment yet, what do you think that should happen to the Supreme Court? Because you want to have more positive news about the judiciary. As far as I see, but I don't know, nothing much is happening. I would like to have your view, what should happen? And also that you explain to me why it doesn't happen. And what you would do if you were in the position to do something about that.
You know, everything will work the way it should be, including the judiciary, when the entire law enforcement system works in the right way. Because I think nothing stimulates people more to comply with the law if they understand that there will be punishment. maybe it has become a tradition of ours when crimes, in particularly in judiciary, came unpunished. That's why we have this situation. There is no quick solution to this problem. We need for the entire law enforcement system to work from the first to the final stage. So if it's only the courts working, but NABU and the Special Anti-Corruption Prosecutor's Office do not work properly, then there will be no order because there are always temptations. And unfortunately, in our country, if you have a position that gives you the power to make important decisions, or if you're somehow connected to state funding, there are definite temptations which not all people can withstand. But if a person understands that in case they commit a crime, they will most likely be punished because the entire law enforcement system is working as it should, then I think the number of crimes would drop dramatically. I will just reiterate the same idea. Nothing actually makes people commit crimes better than the understanding that you will not be punished for it.
I have in front of me a report of the EU, which was published the 31st of October. And it's a long story about what should happen to the judiciary in Ukraine. And I will read to you what this document made by the EU says. Corruption risks in the Supreme Court still need to be adequately addressed. So the EU finds that Ukraine doesn't do enough. Shouldn't it be the responsibility of all judges, but especially the press, to make this known, to make sure that something does happen?
Well, that's the task of mass media to provide news coverage, including coverage for such events. But again, we are coming back to the issues we have already discussed. The things that the public finds interest in should be covered by media, and quite often and recently, because of public activists and the press, we have some criminal proceedings that are initiated, and I'm not speaking about only those pertaining to the judiciary, so it's a positive. But as far as the Supreme Court is concerned, I have already expressed my opinion. We can only fight corruption when we have actual verdicts, regardless of who the guilty party is, when we have actual prison sentences, when we have many verdicts of this type, and if in the majority cases of corruption we have these verdicts, then we will arrive at a judiciary that we are striving for. But in my personal opinion, regardless of how wonderful the HQCJ is, regardless of the efforts they put into their work, if the crimes go unpunished, then we will have the same judiciary for another 30 years. And we may still continue discussing this question.
I will just make a finishing remark and then hand over to my dear friend Yevgen. And my remark is that I find it so strange that in Ukraine, when there are allegations of corruption, like you say, that people just can go on judging instead of that they have to step aside.
Yeah.
Because before there is a judgment in a criminal case against a judge, that will take 3, 4, 5 years. And if we talk about trust in the judiciary, how can you have trust in the judiciary when the public knows that the people where there are allegations of corruption against are still there? But just my remark, and I'll end it here. Thank you so much.
Дякую. Я
Yes, thank you. And if I may, I'd like to respond to your remark. You know, this is the culture of our society in general. Everybody keeps their position regardless of the corruption scandals and regardless of the position they were holding, not just in courts, but anywhere else. I think we should educate the society more, and there should be more positive examples with the officials. So if there is a notorious scandal, there should be political will to remove such people or so that such people leave. Yes, thank you, Oksana. We understand your opinion. So let's continue our interview. You know, within our commission, it often happens that Robert and I ask these very unpleasant questions. So be prepared. Well, first of all, at the beginning of the interview, Robert mentioned that you actually stated that lots of attention is paid to the negative sides of the work of courts and judges. So I'm talking about mass media and speeches of politicians and civil society activists. Yes, indeed, there are foundations to all these claims because we have corruption. It is profound and we have to fight it. And you are claiming that you understand that the problem exists, but at the same time, you do not mention that you, as a judge speaker, are there to balance the coverage with your speeches. And you said that you've never had those speeches, that you've never talked to media. So perhaps you should have paid more attention to this aspect of your work. What I meant, I would have commented on those notorious cases that were important for the society, the cases that our court was dealing with. I understand you because I'm a judge speaker myself, but if you want to improve the situation in your country and you do see the problem, and you see that there is a disbalance because there is more negative coverage of the work of courts, wouldn't it make more sense for you to maybe shoulder some of this burden and contribute to more positive coverage of the work of courts? Don't you think that? Yes, probably, but I never thought about it. With regards to property questions, in the course of our preparation for the interview, we asked you a number of questions. We received exhaustive answers. But at the moment, I want to ask you about the financial discipline and the use of your property, because these are questions that the general public is very much interested in. That's why I believe that we need to discuss the questions that we asked you in writing now during your interview in public. So, in particular, I'd like to ask you about the vehicle which you bought in 2017. This is Toyota RAV4 manufactured in 2010. You bought this car for a sum which equals approximately 8,000 US dollars. At least that's according to the information you provided in the declaration. Then you sold it for a higher price. And then immediately after that, you bought a BMW X3 manufactured in 2015. You bought it from the United States for a sum which equals approximately $8,000. Could you explain this situation to the public? So I'm interested in the situation with the vehicles. Thank you for the question. So with regards to the Toyota RAV4 car, I have a customs declaration to confirm the price of the car and why such value was mentioned in the declaration. And a set price did not include the price of customs clearance, which is quite high as well. And it also didn't include the price of the repairs because that car was generally in good condition, but the only essential issue was with the engine. There was some needle that didn't work, so you needed to repair the engine. Okay, so that was the main issue with the car. And I used that car and then I sold it. So that is why you were able to sell the car at a price that was higher than the price which you declared as the price for which you bought it. Yes, but you need to add the price of repairs and the price of customs clearance. Could you explain the situation with the car that you bought in the US? Again, I provided the invoices to confirm the price of the car, and I think you can use the VIN code to check the actual price and condition. Yes, so we can see this on the website. Yes, there are initial documents which can confirm this information. In case you're interested, everything can be checked. With regards to a land plot which you bought it recently. Again, I will not be mentioning any specific sums because that's irrelevant, but I have to mention the ratio of the sums. So you bought the land plot in Rivne region and you paid a sum which was more or less realistic, and you declared that same price. At the same time, in the agreement that you signed with the seller of the land plot, the indicated price is at least 20 times lower. And I want to explain this for members of the Commission and for the public that under the conditions of the agreement, taxes and fees that are paid to the state budget were supposed to be paid by the seller of the land plot and not you as a buyer. At the same time, how can you explain such a big difference in price? The one indicated in the sale and purchase agreement and the price which you actually paid and which you reported on in your declaration. With regards to the difference in price, as I've already mentioned, the sum specified under the terms and conditions of the agreement was mentioned because that was the initiative of the seller, and actually all the land plots in that area belong to that same legal entity, and I have all the documents pertaining to the land plot. You can see the boundaries of the land plot, and you can see that this land plot borders on the land plots that belong to that same seller. So actually he dictated the terms and conditions of the agreement, and the land plot is located not far from the place where I'm currently residing. You can check it on Google Maps. It's a neighborhood that I'm familiar with, and my mother lives not far from that place, and the land plot was bought at a time when I was pregnant. Oksana, I understand the appeal of that land plot to you. Yes, you bought it because you wanted to buy it. So I'm trying to explain why I agreed to the terms and conditions of the agreement. But the fact that you mentioned the real price in your declaration in terms of anti-corruption legislation means that you didn't violate this legislation. But at the same time, you signed an agreement where the indicated price is much lower. From the moral standpoint and from the standpoint of fiscal services, how should we perceive this? The perception will not be positive, of course. Yes, I understood that I had a choice and I could have turned down the offer of the seller, but I'm trying to explain my motivation to you. Yes, thank you, Oksana. Yes, we've got your answer. Thank you. One of the elements of the motivation letter, which was prepared by Robert, actually, at the beginning of our work as a selection commission. And this motivation letter has a question about the values that you would find hard to uphold if you are appointed as an HQCJ member. So it's a provocative question because this question helps us test whether you are self-critical and whether you can see any faults in your personality. And while answering this question, you said that you will be able to uphold all the moral values and qualities once appointed as an HQCJ member. So in your opinion, is this question irrelevant in the motivation letter? Why do you think that you can comply with all the moral values of a person with high moral qualities? Only in a specific situation, under specific circumstances, I would be ready to answer this question about the values that I would be willing to maybe disregard or not comply with. So it's just a hypothetical question. If you asked me about any specific situation, then I could have answered this question. I can now model 48,000 situations for you, but it will take too much time. We will stay here until morning. So, as far as I know, you're keen on psychology, you're interested in psychology. No, I'm not really interested in reading books on psychology, but at least one of the persons who provided a reference letter to you is a professional psychologist. This is Miss Cherheiko. I will provide her name. She's a professional psychologist. And I'm quoting that she has provided a reference letter to you. She mentioned that you're good at time management and you are able to make very quick, justified decisions. Could you please tell us, can a professional psychologist be so familiar with your ability to make quick and justified decisions? Perhaps you helped Ms. Cherheiko prepare this reference letter. No, I did not help any of those people who prepared reference letters for me. With regards to Svetlana, she is my friend. And maybe she was trying to be very complimentary in the reference letter. But I think that maybe she just extrapolated her experience of communicating with me to that reference letter, because when she approaches me for advice, she often tells me that I can justify answers to my questions. You know, answering questions and preparing core decisions are completely different things. So maybe she didn't really help me in this case. So it was just an extrapolation of her personal experience of our communication, and that's it. So it was a disservice. Yes, thank you. Thank you. How are you feeling? How are you liking our interview? Coming back to the report of the European Commission, a number of experts have analyzed this document, and the European Commission and we as well acknowledge the fact that there is a lack of judges in the judiciary, and the speed of the qualification evaluation is very low. And in an article in Zarkolotezhnya newspaper, there is analysis, which is quite brief. It's analysis of the report of the European Commission, which says the following. The results are unfortunately very modest. This pertains to the work of HQCJ. 170 judges completed the qualification evaluation in a year. It's only 10% of those who were supposed to complete the qualification evaluation by that time. How do you think? Why is the progress so modest? And what should be done for HQCJ to work faster? You know, objectively speaking, the things that could have affected the efficiency of HQCJ and the speed of the decisions made by them, it's that for some time HQCJ was not working, and the issues were accumulating, and there were no competitions and no qualification evaluations. There were some people who started the process during the previous HQCJ composition. So all of this resulted in the current state of affairs. With regards to the speed, it's hard for me to judge because I don't really know what scope of information HQCJ has to process. So you probably have to be one of them to be able to understand where they just show up for meetings to drink coffee. Oh, this is just hypothetical. Or maybe there are some objective reasons, because there is so much information that they have to go through, and the decisions that they are making are obviously very important, and processing of all the documents takes time. I cannot give an answer to this question. I can now participate as a candidate for the position, or and here I can say that there are some problems with the deadlines, but what could be done about it, it's hard to say. But maybe when you're already inside the HQCJ, you will be able to understand what the issue is, and then you can discuss it and offer some solutions. But do you think that those candidates that we initially offered to HCJ and then the HCJ appointed them, do you think they haven't figured it out by now? Haven't figured out what? The scope of work? The problem with speed. I mean, the problem with speed. I think they should have done it by now. How do you think? Or how would you rather comment on the following? We are currently having this lively debate between HQCJ and the Public Integrity Council, and the Parliament is involved, and some experts also involved, and it has to do with a provision of access to judicial dossiers to members of Public Integrity Council. So it's about remote access. So how do you think? Should this access be provided? And in any case, please provide some arguments. So Public Integrity Council complains that they have no remote access to judicial dossiers and they have to physically show up to get to know those dossiers, and this all contributes to the low speed of qualification evaluation, because during qualification evaluation there is also a need for the opinion of Public Integrity Council to be expressed, and the Public Integrity Council just suggested that a remote access be given to them. Well, it's possible if some information maybe is closed once this remote access is granted. So it should be granted. Yes, probably. But they still have access to the judicial dossier. Yes, but from what I understand, the position of HQCJ, so it's about data protection. Yes, it's one of the factors. Data protection should be ensured. And let's imagine a situation, you have a laptop and we don't know how secure it is. We don't know what kind of Wi-Fi is used and who has access to the laptop. And this is sensitive information, of course. That's part of the judicial dossier because it includes lots of information. Maybe there are ways to ensure this in a technical way. So how do you think? Who is correct in this dispute? I think both sides have valid arguments. Dear colleagues, do we have any other questions for Oksana? Thank you for the question.
I want to thank you for your testimony. You have made two of the most interesting statements that I've heard in the course of interviewing many HQCJ candidates. I just wanted to thank you in particular for these. One, you seem to speak from your heart when you spoke about the embarrassment that you sometimes felt to identify yourself as a judge. I don't know if that's a widely held feeling in Ukraine. I hope it's not, and there are many very outstanding judges, but it's interesting to hear that said by somebody who is a judge in Ukraine. For you, it may be true. It may not be true for others, but it's obviously something that comes honestly and from your heart. And secondly, I just want you to know that you have shared something very interesting, at least from my perspective. I don't purport to speak for anybody else on this, but when you say that you have seen people who game the system for this psychological testing, I couldn't agree with you more. And I think, again, you speak, I presume, from your heart, you speak honestly, and I just want you to know that not everyone thinks psychological testing is good for the system. We don't have psychological testing in my country, and I think we do fine. But there are people who disagree with what I'm saying here. But I thought it was very interesting what you said, how people lie and speak falsely to the tests because they know that this answer is a good answer and that answer is not a good answer. So thank you again.
Дякую.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions, dear colleagues? Oksana, right now you have some time for concluding remarks. Thank you. So you have studied my dossier, so I have already characterized myself briefly. The only thing I can say is that participation in this selection for me is not about fulfilling some ambitions. Uh, it doesn't really matter who it's going to be, a man or a woman, what their name is, as long as the results of your efforts are positive and you select the best candidate for this position. Thank you. Thank you. We will try our best. So this concludes the interview. Thank you.